What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. And let me play with the mixer here just a little tiny bit. It is Friday, August 4th, 2017, end of the week. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Our phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. The lovely Lady Claire will be joining us in hour number 3, as usual. And so let's just get right into the news here. Little historical reminder. Sunday will be the anniversary of the United States dropping a nuclear weapon of mass destruction on Hiroshima. And there's an article on the front page of whatreallyhappened.com, Hiroshima, a criminal enterprise from which nothing has been learned. And apparently involves an interview with the son of Paul Tibbets, who was the pilot of that aircraft that dropped that bomb. And there's a lot of revealing information in there, but mostly I think it is important for people to actually read the description of what that bomb did to Hiroshima. And remember, it was very, very tiny compared to what is in use today. And it's worth looking at because, again, my concern is there are too many people out there talking about nuclear war as an abstraction, as something they saw on TV shows and movies, and they don't really understand just how powerful these weapons put up to start. All the products or nuclear weapons or North Korea's nuclear weapons, one and only one nation has ever actually used nuclear weapons of mass destruction on the civilians of another country, and that nation is the United States of America. So if you want to talk about disarming nuclear weapons, let's start with the one country that's actually used them, I think. Now, a little bit of a correction here. You probably heard on the corporate media that Robert Mueller had impaneled a special grand jury to go after Donald Trump and Russia. As it turns out, this is the corporate media getting their facts wrong again. Mueller is using an existing grand jury. They have a couple of grand juries just sitting around Washington, and he's gone to one of them to get some subpoenas. And that's about the extent of it that is going on. But the corporate media is out there saying, oh, it's a grand jury, and grand juries always indict, and this is the end of Trump and Russia. And, of course, the Democrats are drooling over the possibility that they're going to retake Congress next year, which if the GOP doesn't stop the infighting and start working on Trump's agenda that the American people voted him in to office to do, yeah, they could lose the Congress, and then Trump can be impeached here. Now, do you remember a big part of the focus is over meetings that Donald Trump Jr. had with representatives of Russian companies that wanted to get the Magnitsky Act repealed, altered, bypassed to try and get some business done. And one of the people involved was this Russian lawyer, Natalia Veselnitskaya. And she was just interviewed on Rosiva 24, basically saying that as far as you can tell, Congress isn't interested in her testimony on what happened at the meeting. They have no use for her whatsoever. And she went as far as to say they're not looking for the truth, they're looking for an enemy. And she's exactly right about that. And I'm getting all these emails about how why did Donald Trump sign the Russian sanctions if he's a tool of Putin and everything. And he's not a tool of Putin. Congress voted those sanctions through with a veto-proof majority. And Donald Trump signed the legislation rather than get into a veto fight with Congress that he knew he was going to lose. I think he may have miscalculated. I think he should have gone for the veto fight, and yes, he would have lost, but it would have made it very much out there that Congress was behind the Russian sanctions, not Donald Trump. So when these sanctions blow up in everybody's face, which is already starting to look like it's going to happen, Congress would take the blame. Of course, they're going to try and say, oh, it was Trump, he signed it, it's all his fault. Apparently, U.S. Attorney Jeff Sessions is carrying through on his commitment to go after some of the leakers, and 4 White House staffers have already been charged with leaking information to the media. The names have not been released yet, but it has been a major problem going on out there. And we're seeing all these weird things about how the White House is literally being infiltrated by people who do not like Donald Trump. Apparently in the Human Resources Office, they're out there saying that if you read InfoWars or you listen to anything from Milo, that's grounds for dismissal. Donald Trump has to get his house in order. It's actually our house, but he has to get it in order. So Congress has headed into the autumn recess without accomplishing anything significant this year. Public approval of the Congress is down to 10%. We're going to do a shout out now to our honor affiliates just now rejoining the network. Donald Trump himself is off on a 17-day vacation, and the corporate media is already out there saying, well, he said he wasn't going to take vacations last November. See, we caught him lying again. And as usual, the corporate media is not giving you the whole story. The White House is going through a much-needed, long overdue renovation. Apparently, the heating and cooling system needs to be replaced. There are sections of the White House where it simply does not work anymore. And they want to go on in and do new coats of paint, and they want to patch. Apparently there's a lot of holes in the walls. Maybe some of them are left over from when Hillary was flinging ashtrays at Bill's head. But the place needs a little bit of renovation and upkeep. It's going to take about 17 days, and so Trump is off on a working vacation down to one of his properties in New Jersey, and he just took off for that. Now, the Senate is very concerned about recess appointments, and so they've sort of pulled a little bit of a fast one. Basically, they're going to be holding pro forma sessions during the August recess. What that means is some senators are going to walk on in, call the Senate to order, declare that there is no quorum, and adjourn. But as long as they do that, technically the Senate is in session, and that blocks Donald Trump from any recess appointments. And we're seeing a Congress that is taking the presidential powers bit by bit by bit. And they're turning him into an enfeebled king. If you remember the stories about the Merovingians. And if this keeps up, the presidency is going to be little more than a ceremonial title. Like the Queen of England. No real authority, just gets to stand there and look good here. We're going to take a phone call. Rick in Arizona, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Rick, are you there? Aloha, Rick. Okay, going once.
I don't know where I'm at.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. Am I there?
Yeah, you're on the air now. It must be that mutant hamster is just not paying attention.
Yeah, okay. Well, you know, the grand jury, it have to be an already established grand jury because I don't think anybody's going to want to get involved in pinning the tail on this donkey.
I would agree.
And as far as, you know, it's unfortunately, I think what's going to happen is, you know, you mentioned the representatives in Congress. I don't care what happens. These people are going to reelect these incumbents like they do every election cycle.
I don't think so. I think we're seeing the growing awareness of the fact that our elections are a complete fraud. They're a sham. And again, I know a lot of people in Arizona. Have some very good friends who live there, and they all say the same thing. They don't understand why McCain is still their senator because nobody they know votes for him. And you have to wonder, why would anybody in their right mind vote for Nancy Pelosi or Maxine Waters? They can't even get a coherent sentence out of their mouth anymore. And so there's no rule that says stealing elections is confined only to the presidential races.
Well, what about Sessions? Do you think appointing Sessions to the Attorney General's office was a clever way of getting him out of the Senate? I would like to know who's replacing him. Are they liberal? Do they see eye to eye with Sessions?
As I understand it, the Constitution of the state that he came from requires the governor to appoint somebody from the same party.
Okay. Well, anyways, what are these so-called sanctions against Russia? What exactly are these sanctions? You hear about these sanctions and you read an article about these sanctions, but they never talk about exactly what they are applied to.
Well,
I mean, what are they restricting them from doing?
The sanctions are applied to Russian companies, forbidding them to do business with American companies. And it was hoped that Europe was going to go along with these sanctions like they did with the last one, but that doesn't seem to be happening right now. So the real-world result of the sanctions is to drive all these other countries over to the Russian sphere of influence. They're driving Russia and China closer together. They're driving Russia and Germany closer together. These things are an absolute disaster. It's a huge mistake. And like I said earlier in the show, I think Donald Trump should have gone for the veto fight and lost, but that would have absolutely cemented in the public awareness that these sanctions were all Congress's idea, because when it does backflash, and it's already starting to do that, they're going to try and dump this on Donald Trump.
Okay, now they're trying to pass a law that says he can't fire Mueller, but doesn't he have to sign it? I mean, they could come up with a, that starts in the Senate, it's got to go to the Congress. I mean, what kind of crap talk is that? Is they're passing a law that Trump can't fire Mueller and make it retroactive? Doesn't he have to sign it into legislation?
Yes, he does. But again, if they can come up with a veto-proof majority, then Donald Trump is cornered. His next move would be to go to the Supreme Court and say that this is violating the separation of powers doctrine.
Well, anyways, I think most of this is all just talk and pomp and circumstance, so we'll see if anything ever comes out of any of this time next year. Thank you for taking my call.
All right, you got it. And thank you for the phone call. What we're seeing is a government that literally is at war with itself in full public view. And again, this is the same sort of thing we were seeing in the Soviet Union in the months before that government collapsed. So I think that's where we're headed on this. And a lot of people in the international community are paying attention to what's going on. Story out of Sputnik is saying we're seeing literally a shift in the U.S. constitutional government, leading to a totally powerless president and an omnipotent Congress. And again, a lot of people are getting very worried over Congress is now starting to stir up all kinds of new frictions and problems. First of all, with the sanctions. Now they're talking about repealing the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty with Russia, which means the U.S. is going to start deploying nuclear-tipped intermediate-range rockets all along Russia's border. Remember, the U.S. did that once before in Turkey, and that's what led to the Cuban Missile Crisis. Most people are unaware because your schools and corporate media will not tell you the Cuban Missile Crisis was actually triggered by the Turkey Missile Crisis. So everyone's gearing up for the war, and Congress is, unless they come up with a declaration of war against Russia, they're playing a very, very dangerous game. Okay, getting on back to this story, Conservative Review editor-in-chief Mark Levin is saying that these leakers want to destroy Trump. And he's talking about the fact that the original claim that Mueller had impaneled a special grand jury was leaked to the corporate media, who then ran with it. And now, of course, we know the story is not entirely accurate. There are several permanent grand juries. I think a grand jury, when they're impaneled, it's for something like 2 years. And they handle all the grand jury cases. And he's gone to one of them to have them issue subpoenas for some of the information. But the story got completely overblown here. Now, Representative Franks is out there saying that Mueller, forget about firing him, he should resign. He's in clear violation of the federal code because almost all of his staff are made up of hardcore Democrats. They made huge donations to Democrats, donations to Hillary. There is no way that you can look at the makeup of the special counsel's office and see it as anything other than a highly partisan hatchet squad. And basically totaling up all the donations by Mueller's lawyers, basically for every $1 somebody in that office gave to Donald Trump, they gave $520 to Clinton. It's a political hit squad, plain and simple. And he's already exceeded his mandate. We're supposed to look at the Russia-Trump collusion, and there's nothing there. And so he's gone on a mission creep. He's just on a fishing expedition anywhere he can go to find anything. Now, apparently, the Justice Department finally responded to a Judicial Watch lawsuit on the meeting between Bill Clinton and Loretta Lynch on the airport. The only problem is it's been heavily redacted. So it's a cover-up. It's obvious there's a cover-up. They were obviously talking about something more than grandchildren, and the Department of Justice felt that whatever was in there was a threat to the national security, meaning their reputation, and they just redacted it. And Judicial Watch may come back with a countersuit saying, look, unless this is why is this classified information if this was just a casual meeting on the tarmac? Very alarming story coming out of foreignpolicy.com. Memo to Pence, prepare to be Gerald Ford. They're already talking about Trump's impeachment or resignation as a done deal. And they're offering advice to Mike Pence on how he should start getting ready to make that transition right now. There was another story 2-3 weeks ago about Pence is already planning his inauguration. I don't think that one's true, but it's part of the propaganda they're putting on out there. They're trying to get Americans ready to accept the idea that the president we voted into the White House is about to get kicked out because he's not part of the club. He's not part of the clique. He's not part of the deep state. He's not part of the narcocracy. And, of course, on the other side, Trump has completely abandoned any idea of world peace. He's been totally corralled by the military-industrial complex, and he's being forced into continuing this orchestrated and dangerous tensions with Russia. And the reality is, and one of the reasons why the sanctions are going to backfire, Russia is much more valuable to Washington as an enemy than as a friend. And that was the thinking back in the Cold War. We can't make any money off of Russia by being friends with them. We need an enemy. In fact, when Reagan got together and started making nice with the Soviet Union before it collapsed, I think it was Gorbachev said, I'm going to do the worst thing in the world to the United States. I'm going to deprive you of the enemy that you use to control your people. So they want to bring back Cold War 2.0, except this war is already gone hot in all these countries. Now, back during the original Cold War, it worked because America was a prosperous nation. The American people were making good money, and they could afford the higher taxes that fueled the war machine. That's not true anymore. Most Americans are just barely getting by. Now, living in their ivory towers, I'm sure the military-industrial complex is absolutely convinced, oh, there's plenty of money out there. There's plenty of money out there. We'll just borrow it if we have to. But that's just not true. And we don't have the money. We don't have the manufacturing. We don't have the manpower. And we certainly don't have the moral right to win this war. And even the Pentagon is saying on a force against force ground battle, Russia will annihilate the U.S. Army. And at that point, they're going to start pressing those little buttons in those little silos, and it will be a bad day for anybody not wearing 2 million sunblock. Now, you remember Rick Perry? He ran for president, and apparently Trump is considering him to head the Department of Homeland Security now that the former Homeland Security head, John Kelly, is the White House Chief of Staff. So they're shifting all those people around. All right, we're going to take a little break here for commercials, and we'll be back after these few words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, Debbie Wasserman Schultz is now changing her story about that laptop that she's been trying to keep from the police. Now, initially she said it was her laptop. She didn't want anybody looking at it. She literally threatened the D.C. police with budget cuts if they went into that laptop. Now, she's backed off on that, and supposedly there may be a deal in the works. But she's now saying it actually wasn't her laptop. it was the property of Imran Awan. So looks like whatever's on that laptop, Schultz is getting ready to say, well, Awan did this. I'm innocent over here. And supposedly the story is that Awan was using that laptop to copy data off secure computer systems in the Congress, the House of Representatives, and ferry it someplace else, and nobody really knows where that is. This is shaping up to be a huge espionage scandal. Now, Representative Ron DeSantis, Republican of Florida, he's an Oversight Committee member, chair of the National Security Subcommittee, is petitioning Attorney General Jeff Sessions to freeze all Pakistani assets tied to Imran Awan. And I think that would be a really good idea. Apparently, this guy, through various bank frauds and who knows what all blackmail, had amassed quite a fortune. In fact, when he was arrested at the Dulles airport, he was trying to get some of it out of the United States back to Pakistan. Meanwhile, Wasserman is out there saying, well, that the only reason there's any fuss about Imran Awan, it's anti-Muslim bias. It's just racism. There's no crime here at all. It's just they hate him because he's Muslim. Desperation on the cusp of madness. Now, as you know, the governor of West Virginia has changed party affiliations. Used to be a Democrat, just decided he wanted to be a Republican. That now means the majority of the states, 26, thin majority, now have Republican governors. And over at MSNBC, Joy Reid is already out there saying, oh, he's got to be working for the Russians. It really is ridiculous. Now, do you remember when the Democrats were running around saying that Republicans were these dangerous crazies and got to take their guns away and they're violent and unpredictable? Well, apparently the foot is on the other shoe right now because of something called the Redneck Revolt. Apparently the Democrats have now discovered they need the deplorables, and it's this radical left-wing, literally a terrorist organization. They're recruiting kids to literally wage war against Donald Trump and all his supporters. It's getting a little scary out there. Judicial Watch, apparently they're looking into this issue of election fraud out in California. And despite bureaucratic resistance, they've been able to get the voter rolls from Los Angeles, San Diego, and other major counties, and they are all showing more people voted than lived in those counties, in some cases by as much as 40%. It is a massive, massive problem out there. They don't want you to think about this. They don't want you to realize that the elections are just a show to keep the insiders on the inside and to keep the outsiders out, and that's why Trump's victory was such a shock. All right, so let's get into the war zones, emphasis on the plural. The Lebanese army has been shelling positions held by Daesh militants holed up in the outskirts of a northeastern border town. The fight is continuing over there. Now, the Syrian Defense Forces and the Syrian Army are boosting their cooperation, and they've set up a joint operations room in order to coordinate the campaign against ISIS. And if you look at that Syrian tactical map that's always being updated, they're making tremendous gains. There's absolutely no question that the U.S.-backed rebels and other troublemakers are losing this one. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And if you're trying to reach the whatreallyhappened.com server, it's under hack attack again. In fact, the last few days, it has really been very heavy, mostly focusing on all the articles about Hillary Clinton. And in fact, it's about as intense as it was just before the election. And it almost feels like something is up. And I'm not the only one. Some of the other independent media websites are getting DOS attacks all the time. They're trying to silence us, get people to stop showing up. And I'm very concerned that something big is about to happen. Now then, getting on back to Syria. The new Russia-brokered ceasefire agreement comes into effect, and as one of the results of that, wounded civilians are going to be treated at Russian and Syrian military hospitals. And there are a lot of wounded civilians out there. It's definitely necessary. Apparently, the coalition killed a bunch more kids up in Raqqa. And the coalition is admitting they've killed 624 civilians, but it's unintentional. We didn't mean to. We feel really bad about it, but we're trying to do good here. It's not like we killed anybody you know. Anyway, the U.S. is now sounding a warning of grave consequences if Syria's al-Qaeda dominates Idlib. See, ISIS is on the run, so now the focus is going to go back to al-Qaeda, saying, ooh, al-Qaeda's, they're having, they're getting close to Idlib. They're looking for another excuse to go back into Syria, even though they do not have the permission of Syria's government to be there. Ooh, it's al-Qaeda, al-Qaeda. We just have to go back into Syria now. We just have to. Anyway, a lot of people are starting to wonder if Iran actually made a mistake by agreeing to the nuclear deal with the United States. And the reason they are is they're looking at the history of U.S. aggressions. The United States does not attack nations that have nuclear weapons. That's the whole point of having nuclear weapons, to deter aggression. That was the excuse the U.S. government gave us when they built the world's largest nuclear arsenal. We've got to deter aggression. All right, same thing applies to all these other countries. So by abandoning their ambitions to have a nuclear deterrent, Iran has actually speeded up the day when the U.S. is going to invade. And we're having all these indications that October is when they want to go into Iran. Tillerson is out there saying that the U.S. is examining the P5+1 nuclear deal to find out how it can prove Iran has violated the agreement. They want to tear it on up. Well, Iran is up there at the United Nations saying that these new sanctions put on Iran by the United States violate the P5+1 agreement. You can't take the U.S. government's word for anything. Things over in Ukraine are getting very unsettled, and I don't just mean all the weapons going on in and all the continued bloodshed there. Amazingly enough, the Washington Post came out with a story, very rare moment of truth and accuracy. Poroshenko is a menace to Ukrainian democracy, and basically was saying that Kiev's recent moves to strip Saakashvili and remove him from office, as an example, removing threats for the 2019 parliamentary race. And Poroshenko is so unpopular to his own people that even nobodies like Saakashvili are a threat to him, or at least that's what he's seeing, and he has reason to worry. Because the Kiev Council and the regional deputies of 10 provincial councils are demanding Poroshenko be impeached. They want him out. They're tired of the war. They're tired of Poroshenko's constant kowtowing to Europe and the United States. They want their country back. Now, advisor to Putin, Sergei Glaziev, is out there saying it's time to recognize the United States of America as an aggressor nation. Little behind the real world. We've already figured that out here. And is basically saying that keeping the currency of the foreign exchange reserve in American securities is a dubious investment. And he's right about that, because we all know a big stock market crash is coming. The securities are low yielding. There's always a risk that the capital can be frozen by the U.S. government. And he says it's immoral. Anybody investing in U.S. securities is subsidizing the cost of the U.S., including the war machine. Yes, the United States is an aggressor nation. Look over the last 16 years. Who's doing all the invading? Who's doing all the drone strikes? Who's doing all the regime changes? Now, as I mentioned earlier in the program, the United States Congress is seriously considering tearing up the 1987 Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. And in point of fact, the United States never kept their side of the bargain. They didn't destroy their intermediate range missiles. They kept them. They said it was just for training purposes. We're going to use them for targets. But all they got to do is put the warheads back on, and they're ready to rumble. The U.S. rarely keeps their treaty commitments. There was a treaty on biological weapons that was signed with all bunches of countries a while back. Then we find out the U.S. never destroyed their stockpiles. Now, earlier today, the Higher Regional Court of Dusseldorf struck down on provisional measures that had restricted Gazprom's access to the German Opal pipeline that were enacted following a complaint by Poland's state-run oil and gas PGNiG. And so that is now all resolved. And the upshot of this article that came out of Sputnik News is Western Europe is not afraid to cooperate with Russia. They want to make deals. They're not apparently going to go along with the new sanctions. So it looks like Europe is slipping out of U.S. control. Meanwhile, over in Iraq, their prime minister, Haider al-Abadi, is calling for economic relations, strengthening economic relations with Tehran. So it looks like Iraq is slipping away from U.S. control after all that money and bloodshed. Another article, this one again from Sputnik News, the imperial folly brings Russia and Germany together. And it starts off with a very quotable line, the empire of whiners simply can't get enough when it comes to huff, puff, and pout as the empire of sanctions. And they're pointing out the U.S. has essentially declared an economic war against Russia. It's actually been going on for 3 years now, since the first sanctions. But they're pointing out that the latest round of sanctions effectively declares economic war against Europe, especially Germany. And that's why Europe is turning away. They're getting sick of all this nonsense. Now, over at BRICS, they're basically under the pressure of the sanctions. They're rushing to finalize their alternative economic system, one where dollars will not be needed. And we're hearing that Russia and China are about to dump the dollar from their foreign currency reserves. I really don't understand the thinking out of Washington, D.C. They're going from one foreign policy disaster to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. Over in Israel, little bit of good news. Ari Haro, who's a former chief of staff of Netanyahu and close confidant, has agreed to be a state witness. He's going to testify against Netanyahu in exchange for the government scrapping a likely prison sentence for a string of past corruption allegations. So the police flipped him. He's going to testify against Netanyahu. Now, the European Union has hired an Israeli who basically advocates just getting rid of the Palestinians as the face of a new promotional campaign that is trying to convince Europeans how important their relationship with Israel is. how Israel is a customer for, or how the EU is a customer for Israel's weapons industry. They talk about all the trade and industry and how much money we're making and, you know, things that we need from Israel. And they're trying to counter the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. Getting on over to the Koreas, the U.S. is getting ready to deploy 2 aircraft carriers back to the peninsula, the USS Ronald Reagan and the USS Carl Vinson. And this is according to South Korean military officials. And we keep hearing this rumor, if you will, that they're going to go into North Korea next month. And partly that's fueled by the United States ordering all U.S. citizens out of North Korea and imposing a travel ban. Now, North Korea has hit back at that travel ban, saying that tourism is a big part of their economy, and they actually do get a lot of tourists from the United States. And all this grumbling about possible war, yeah, it's going to cut into the tourism industry. Nobody wants to go someplace that might be bombed, unless you're a war buff. You get a thrill sitting in a hotel and watching a city in front of you go up in flames. Kim Jong-un, and I know his status in that part of the world is being improved by standing up to the American bully, but I wish he would tone down the rhetoric a little bit. North Korea is threatening the U.S. with unexpected gift packages after the missile test. This is in response to the U.S. talking about an invasion. They're dropping hints they've got something that the U.S. does not know about. That's going to ratchet up the tensions here. Article coming out of Global Research up in Canada. A reminder of what happened during the start of the Korean War. General Curtis LeMay, who led the bombing raids against North Korea, was quoted as saying, over a period of 3 years, we killed off 20% of the population. And that was apparently a low estimate. It's now believed that the population north of the imposed 38th parallel lost nearly a third, 8 to 9 million people, during the 37-month-long hot war. And I guess if the U.S. government killed off 1/3 of my people, I'd want a nuclear deterrent so it doesn't happen again. China has come out strongly opposing the new U.S. sanctions against Russia, Iran, and North Korea. They're starting to echo Germany, saying that the United States does not have a right to compel other countries in terms of who they do business with. Now, getting on down to that border with India, here's what's going on down there. The issue with the road is a little more complex. As you know, China is working on the One Belt, the new Silk Road. High-speed rail, new highway, going to become a main conduit for the transport of goods between China and Europe. Save a lot of money, save a lot of time. They won't be having to send things by cargo ship. Well, it turns out India wanted to build a super transit corridor as well, reaching into Europe. And apparently, because of the way the Himalayas are, they actually did have to build part of that road through Chinese territory. I guess they hoped it wouldn't be noticed, but China did notice this. That's the real issue. India's transit corridor is going to be competition for China's, and that's why this thing has been heating up. And China right now is accusing India of massing troops and supplies near that border incursion. So what's going on here? All of a sudden, China is becoming a world player. Foreign bases. We're seeing the awakening of the Chinese dragon with a more assertive foreign policy. that may become the new normal. It's a reminder that the unipolar world under the United States has gone away, and we're back to a multipolar world. Russia, China, the United States. Now, China is backing Venezuela's Constituent Assembly process. As you know, it's being criticized by the United States. It's being called a grab for dictatorship. Basically, it's Venezuela's equivalent of a constitutional convention to make changes to their constitution, because as things are right now in the National Assembly, the opposition has so many seats, they're blockading Maduro's every move, the way our Congress is blocking everything Trump is trying to do. And this process of a constituent assembly is in Venezuela's constitution. It is the letter of the law down there. He's not doing anything illegal or drastic or tyrannical. And remember, the head of the CIA has admitted what's going on in Venezuela right now is another U.S.-backed regime change operation. Apparently, Royal Dutch Shell Company is closer to a major oil deal with Iran. They're not interested in going along with the U.S. sanctions, obviously. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to take a couple of phone calls here. Brendan in San Francisco. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I've been wanting to call in regarding two separate subjects. One just occurred. I was passing an automobile accident on over here in the Bay Area, and it was a pretty horrific scene, fire truck, cops, everything. I pull out my cell phone to record the accident, and as soon as I played the tape back, the recording, it only showed when I picked up my phone and turned on the camera to record, and then when I put my phone away, it deleted all of the accident scene within probably 20 seconds of me going to rewind and look at it when I parked. And I'm wondering, do you think that is some weird feature that they now have installed that could, they may have triggered some kind of delete function on my phone? It's an iPhone.
They may have. I mean, I've been hearing talk about it for quite some time, that cell phones and cell phone cameras, or any camera with a Wi-Fi port on it, can be remotely disabled if the police don't want you to have anything going on, any video of what's going on. I've never heard of it actually being used. My first thought would be that I had done something wrong until it happens more than 2 or 3 times. Then you realize that something very funny is going on. What I can't understand is why they would delete the videos if it was just a traffic accident.
Right. Now, I'd like to send you the video to get a little bit more confirmation, but the picture quality is perfect. When I pick up the phone, you can see my car stereo, and even Jimi Hendrix is playing in the background throughout the whole sequence. But only when I pick up the phone and put it back down does it show video. The intersection in between is completely blank. And I have heard they do have a function to kill cameras at police discretion. So I'd like to send that over to you. And I wanted to make a critique on the show, if I may.
Okay.
I agree with you like 99.999. The one thing I struggle with is when you say that we're going to have a Soviet-style collapse and to just let it happen. I struggle with that because I'm convinced that they have a ton of sleeper cells here. They just
They who?
The law enforcement just caught a gentleman of Islamic descent trying to shoplift ammo, and I may have even heard that story from you, and that gave them the right to go onto their property and look around, and it's kind of, the story's been buried from what I can tell, but we do know in California and throughout the country there are these Islamic camps.
Okay, Brendan, I'm sorry, I got to cut you off. We got to do our station identification. Thank you for the phone call. We'll be back with another phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're going to take a phone call from James in Charlotte. James, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Just something I came across. I thought I'd tell you about and see maybe if you knew anything about it. I was digging through the book bargain bin down at the Goodwill store a couple of days ago, and when I got back almost to the bottom, I happened to see a book, and I could see on the spine of the book there was the title, and it said "By Way of Deception."
Oh, that's a great book. That's a great book.
Oh, you know about it?
Oh, I know about it. Yes, well, Victor Ostrovsky.
Well, now, don't spoil it for me. I'm
not going to spoil it to you, but it's going to be an eye-opener, and I think you're really going to enjoy it.
Well, I've just gotten into the first couple of chapters, and I'm beginning to realize what an incredibly organized and hierarchical structure the Mossad is.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I have found out already in just the brief few pages I've read is that they manage to imbue anyone, no matter how little they are involved. They're like I say, is very hierarchical, and even those at the very outside of the organization are imbued with this. What would you call it? A spirit or a brainwashing, I guess, of this David and Goliath mentality.
Mm-hmm.
That that they are fighting a world that is trying to destroy them.
Yeah, that unfortunately is something that all Israelis are propagandized with right from birth. And basically it allows them to mentally accept anything they're told to do. The ends justify the means, go on out, sink the Liberty because we need the U.S. to attack Egypt, and so forth and so on. And one of the things that makes the Mossad so potent around the world is the strong allegiance to Israel in Jewish people who've lived their entire lives in other countries. And the Mossad keeps databases of these people, and they're called the Sayanim. They're not formally a part of the Mossad, but they are Jewish people in other countries who can be relied on to perform certain tasks for the Mossad. Car dealers who can make a car available to them, doctors who will treat a bullet wound without leaving any paper record, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I wasn't familiar with that word, but I was familiar with the basic structure there.
Yes.
Well, I definitely want to get more into the book, and I appreciate your information.
Okay, well, yeah, I think you're really going to enjoy it. It's an eye-opener, and Victor Ostrovsky, of course, has left the Mossad. He lives in Arizona now, and he's actually become an artist. He's got a gallery out there, and he sells paintings along with his books. All right, well, James, we're going to let you go here. Get on back to the news here. We're talking about the economic news. And, we're going to take another phone call. Mark in Charlotte. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mark in Charlotte. Aloha, welcome to the show.
Yeah, how you doing there, Mike?
I'm doing fine. Can you turn the computer speaker down?
Yeah, I did. I already did.
All right.
I just want to ask you something.
Yeah.
I don't know if you addressed it. I just turned you on that. I just got home. What do you think happened to Tulsi Gabbard? That she actually, I was shocked that she actually voted for these sanctions. And, I'd hoped that maybe for 2020 that maybe there was somebody maybe in a third party or something. And she dashed it.
Well, overall I like Tulsi Gabbard, but obviously I disagreed with the sanctions. And again, we know that the CIA has been lying to Donald Trump because they assured him that there was absolutely no question that Assad gassed those people at Idlib. So we can presume that the CIA is lying to other members of the government, members of Congress, swearing an oath on a Bible doesn't mean anything to them.
Yeah, but Tulsi's, first of all, she was in the military. She's wise to the way that the brass works. She knows the thing about with Assad is nonsense. So you'd think she would also know the stuff about Russia is nonsense. I just don't understand this. I mean, maybe somebody, maybe she made a deal with somebody. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's hard for me to believe that they could just put one over on her and that she would buy this nonsense. I mean, Rand Paul sure didn't buy it, and neither did Bernie Sanders.
Well, I'm sure that the deep state, the war party, the military-industrial complex definitely put a lot of pressure on everybody in the Congress. And one of the reasons I'm very surprised Tulsi went along with it is because she understands at the far end of the sanctions is the risk of a real war, and Tulsi's state, Hawaii, is going to get hit. And for her to risk that for whatever political gain she got, I don't know. I'm puzzled about that one. But Tulsi's never returned any of my emails or messages. I wanted to get her on the show. But yeah, there's an issue there. All right, well, Mark, we're going to let you go. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates rejoining the network. And getting on back to the economic news, Trump is getting ready to start a trade war with China, and the excuse for it is they're going to have an investigation into China's trade policies and intellectual property practices. And there is a real issue there. China has a long and bad reputation for copying other people's technology. I remember when the original Top Gear, Jeremy Clarkson, they went to China, and he was basically just showing all these things, copy the iPhone, copy the iPad that he'd bought there for just a few dollars, and that is a major, major issue. But a trade war with China is going to cause a lot more harm to us than to them, because we don't make products anymore. We buy everything from China, including the licensed official iPhones and iPads. If Trump starts a trade war with China, I mean, we need China's manufacturing a lot more than China needs our money. They're moving away from the dollar anyway. It's another very foolish thumping of the chest move. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Dude in Modesto, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? You're on the air. Okay, I guess you're off the air. So, good night, Modesto. Claire's laughing. If you've seen the movie Aliens versus Monsters, or Monsters versus Aliens, it's a great movie, great animated movie. All righty, getting back to the economy. Apparently, the numbers for retailers continue to decline, and they're still trying to blame it all on Amazon. But the reality is, Amazon looks to be in a bubble, and that's flattening off. But they're predicting there will be thousands more stores closing by the end of the year, because people just don't have money to buy these goods anymore. It's all been sucked out of our society by the military machine and the money junkies. Bed Bath & Beyond is going to cut 880 store-level management positions. And the pharmaceutical giant Teva is going to fire 7,000 people and close or sell 15 of their factories. Now, over in France, the French Parliament has approved Macron's drive to loosen the labor laws. They're trying to slash unemployment by making the process of hiring people a little bit less arduous. And it's a short-term fix, I think, but it doesn't really fix the core problem behind all of these struggling nations all over the world, which is those private central banks. That's where it all comes from. We are living in nations with a dishonest monetary system. Now, yesterday we were talking about how some of these so-called rescue ships run by non-governmental organizations that claim to rescue refugees from sinking boats in the Mediterranean and then take them to Europe instead of their home countries, had actually faked it all. They'd actually faked the whole situation. Well, apparently Italy finally has had enough, and they've impounded a German non-governmental organization rescue boat on suspicion of aiding illegal immigration. The vessel was the Leventa, operated by the Jugendrettet organization, and was impounded on the orders of a prosecutor based in Trapani, Sicily. So there are some parts of the governments over there that are trying to get this situation under control before it gets any worse. Up in Sweden, this liberal paradise, liberal government, feminist, politically correct, wonderful thing. Apparently the army came on out with this bizarre statement that the purpose of Sweden's army is to defend gay rights, and even the Swedes couldn't swallow that one. There was a huge, huge backlash on all this PC nonsense here. We know that Italy's in trouble economically. We know that Brussels broke their own rules to get an emergency bailout to them, but they're still teetering on the brink. And apparently there is now serious talk about an Italexit, saying that there has to be a managed end to the euro because it is simply not working. Okay, Dude from Modesto is back, and I guess we got a good phone line working now. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Yeah, I got cut off, but hey, I wanted to talk about North Korea.
Mm-hmm.
I watch a lot of documentaries from a long time ago and recently on North Korea, and I wanted to run this by you because to me, when people talk about war, I only see, a lot of people see all kinds of politics, but I see the man on the street. And I would like to know when he goes over to North Korea, what are they going to expect? And from what my research, I just want to run this by you, and then I'll let you talk about it. It's just the military situation. It seems that, a lot of these documentaries seem to say that they got over 7 million troops. They got a tunneling system through the mountains, up and down these mountains. They said they got a really complex, tunneling system, which has, I guess, the Viet Cong used that against the Americans too. And, how is China going to feel about that? The last time that the U.S. was on their borders, we all know what happened. And with the U.S. being more aggressive nowadays, it seems that, they're not going to want it even less. That they got, and I've also seen documentaries on China's economic ties with the U.S. I don't understand why they would want to mess with that. It seems like both economies are almost tied to each other.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you can talk about that with me, my grandfather fought in Korea, and he talked about the winters in North Korea, that was the big issue, when he was over there. So if you can, talk about that. And plus, obviously North Korea is a nuclear power. And
well, not quite yet. Not quite yet. I mean, they're testing nuclear devices, but they are still years away from actually putting a warhead onto a rocket.
Okay. Well, if you can talk about this with me, and the reason why I ask this is because, a lot of people think that North Korea is going to be a simple war, and I don't, given those factors, yeah, they might be able to bomb, everything in the glass, but as soon as they, put troops on the ground, I think that's when the reality is going to turn in, and this is not really going to be all that easy of a war.
Well, we're already seeing people in the Pentagon saying exactly the same thing, that if the United States invades North Korea on the ground, this is a war that could literally cost millions of lives. And North Korea, because the Korean War never really ended, North Korea has spent the last 50 years
70 years.
Yeah, basically, you know, making sure that they've got a defensive force. They've got huge amounts of conventional artillery. They do have that tunneling system. All their artillery is dug in to shelters so they can't be bombed from overhead. They do have a lot of people in uniform, very highly trained and very motivated, because they all remember what happened the last time the U.S. came on in, which is why I think what is being contemplated by Washington, D.C. Is a decapitation strike. They're going to go for Kim Jong-un himself and the nuclear test sites and anything else they think is connected with the nuclear program, the missile factories, whatever. The problem is that by now Kim Jong-un has started dispersing all of that, and there's absolutely no way to guarantee that they're going to get all the weapons when they go on in with this surgical strike. And whoever takes...
Exactly. And the point...
it's not going to be an easy war. I mean, look how long we were in Afghanistan, and Afghanistan had nowhere near the military resources of North Korea.
And the problem with that is, to me, it seems like, given all these factors, 7 million troops in there, these guys can go up and down these mountains really easily. I've heard things from other documentaries that if the U.S. tries to raise an army to actually be able to take on that kind of thing, number one, a lot of these people, it just doesn't seem like they can raise an army that quickly. Just, seeing a lot of Americans aren't really
they might institute the draft here, but there's another factor to keep in mind, and that is that we've raised a generation of perpetual whiners who cry if they get a splinter, and 38% of them are morbidly obese because of all the chemicals in our food. These are not going to be effective fighting personnel. And when you match that with the very poor quality weapons and costly poor quality weapons being put out by the military-industrial complex, this is a mistake. I mean, we never won the first Korean War. This is going to be a continuation of it, and we're not going to win that one either.
I don't think we're going to win this war either. In fact, when we're talking about being put in a quagmire, with the financial condition that the U.S. government is in,
yes,
that we could very well lose this war just for that alone. We can go broke fighting this war.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does that sound reasonable?
It's very reasonable.
Given all this, it seems like they're making a big deal out of firing long-range missiles. I'm going to go now, but do you think that's a good reason to get into something like this?
Well, no, there isn't, but you need to understand, all financial experts are saying that by the end of the year, we're going to be in a major, major economic crisis. Alan Greenspan is out there saying we're going to see the biggest bond bubble burst in all of U.S. history when this all starts to come apart. And if our government does not have a war to blame all the hardship on, then the American people are going to blame the government, and they're going to blame Wall Street. They're going to blame those bankers. And the bankers don't want to take the blame. Our politicians don't want to take the blame. They want to be able to stand up there and say, yes, you're all starving and you've all lost your homes and jobs, but it's all the fault of that evil Putin in Russia. It's all the fault of China. Right. It's all the fault of Kim Jong-un. And this is something they have done before. Every time they get into an economic mess, they get involved in a world war to have a distraction away from it. Crash of 1907, World War I. Crash of 1929, World War II. Crash of 2008, and look how close we are to a global war.
And the thing is, when we talk about that, I study a little bit about empires, and from my reading of empires, there's always that one big last war where, the debt grows so large that the bankers want them to wage more than one war to pay that, to even make payments. If the U.S. government is about to collapse, it's going to need to borrow money, and that seems to be, for the most part, the reason, like you said, why, when the economy is about to collapse, they're not going to let the government go, so they're going to wage a war just to get that money to keep the government alive. Is that
they'll just crank up the printing presses or type into the computer, and the rest of us will pay the cost of that with runaway, out-of-control Zimbabwe-style inflation. Okay, dude, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, over in Great Britain, the United Nations is now demanding Great Britain take in double the number of refugees under this program to grant humanitarian asylum to people fleeing the Syrian conflict. The only problem being it's turned out most of those claiming to be fleeing the Syrian conflict were not, in fact, actually in any danger. But the United Nations is saying you got to double the number of people going on in. And you need to remember the United Nations is fully on board with this idea of a one-world government because they see themselves as being in charge of it. Apparently, over in the Express, they've got an article, Poland doesn't need the EU. Poland isn't needed by the EU. As you know, Poland has been straining at the leash with Brussels. But it's another indicator that the EU is about to tear itself apart. Now, Angela Merkel has actually admitted to Donald Trump that she now regrets opening the borders of Germany to migrants, saying Germany is a mess. Now, this was a phone call between Merkel and Trump, and apparently somebody leaked the transcripts of these calls. So, despite Merkel's continued public support for open borders, she knows what it's doing to her country. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
It's Mama Merkel. It's like Mama Hillary. It's just they're the same. They're the same.
Mm.
You know, that's globalism. They're the same playbook and the same standards and everything. I mean, what a joke these people are, right?
Yeah, but every night they go to bed and dream that it's going to be their particular butt sitting on that golden throne of planet Earth.
Hey, Mike, you know, I don't think the Chinese are going to allow North Korea to fall. Not because they'll have refugees, but because it's a strategic ally. If you look on the map, I mean, you know, that's a way into China, right?
Well, yes, to an extent, but we already know that China is already starting to fortify their side of the border with North Korea because they are concerned following the U.S. attack there's going to be a flood of refugees, and they just don't want them. At this point, I would not want to bet China will get involved in a war with the United States over North Korea. Yes, they've been very close. China needs those raw materials from North Korea. But I think China understands that ultimately the U.S. government is using North Korea as a backdoor to get a war with China going.
And you know, all those tests that North Korea has done with the anti-aircraft, you know, those are all based on the S-300. so it's coming out. We might have air superiority, but, you know, I'm going to tell you that North Korea ain't no Iraq, you know, and I don't think we're going to, I mean, you got to be insane. Yeah, that's an army, man. I mean, it would be like we never seen this before, since before Vietnam. You know, I mean, they got to be insane to pull this out. I mean,
they were insane to go.
No, we're coming.
It was insane to go into Vietnam. Didn't stop them from doing it.
They'll know we're coming. There's just, like you said, there's no way you're going to knock him out. There's just no way you're going to knock out enough of his things. If he has a couple deliverable, short-range nuclear weapons, you know, use them or lose them is the saying, right?
Well, yeah, once they're attacked, they've got no reason not to use whatever they've got here. I mean, that's how we really knew Saddam did not really have nuclear weapons of mass destruction, because as his nation was being invaded, that would have been the time for him to use them, and he never did. The U.S. government lied to us about Saddam's nuclear weapons, and they're trying to basically exaggerate the North Korean nuclear threat, because North Korea is not threatening the United States.
Yeah, he's crazy. That's all. He's either Hitler or he's crazy. That's the playbook. You know. Hey, Mike, remember the artillery piece? Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I mean, they were demonizing Ahmadinejad in Iran. They made up lies about him. They were demonizing Saddam. We have to stop listening to the government's propaganda about these foreign leaders and find out for ourselves just what's really going on. Now, I agree that we are being told Kim Jong-un is saying some very provocative things, but apparently his stature in that part of the world is actually being improved. He's standing up to the U.S. bully, and that's scoring a lot of points. Dustin, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And getting on back to the situation in Europe, France and Sweden are getting ready for a confrontation with Eastern European nations. They want to crack down on low-paid migration under the free movement rules. All of these nations in Europe are starting to strain at the leash over this idea of this flood of refugees coming on in, which has caused nothing but problems for these nations. But George Soros wants us all blurred together. You know, no more nationalities, no more ethnic identity, except, of course, for Israel. We got to keep them pure. Now, one of the problems that has come into Europe with the refugees is this idea of an acid attack, which is just possibly one of the most cruel things that you can do to a woman. And apparently women who are thought to be inappropriately dressed or made up by Muslims are subject to these attacks. And they've become so widespread in Europeistan, they're starting to train the public how to treat the victims, what to do if you see an acid attack. And it's part of this idea that the people of Europe are just supposed to accept all of this. Yeah, there's acid attacks. Okay, yeah, there's a lot of rapes. Yeah, it's okay. Small price to pay for the New World Order empire. Meanwhile, over in Germany, they have this Muslim who is out there saying he's a fanatic. He's ready to commit a jihadi massacre. Germany wants to deport him. The European court blocked it. You will keep this Muslim in your country even though he is threatening to kill people. They are drawing some very hard battle lines here over this issue. We don't care if these people are a threat. We don't care if it's a problem. We don't care if Germany's a mess. You just keep pouring them on in to Europe and, for that matter, the United States of America. As fast as they can. They're trying to get their plan completed for the New World Order because they're realizing the rest of the world is starting to really push back. Here in the United States, somebody did an economic study. As you know, even though the border wall is being funded, there is still a push here in Congress for this amnesty bill. We're going to just give all the illegals amnesty and that will be just wonderful. Except that all of these illegals are, like most Americans, not going to be able to find jobs. They're going to be living off of social assistance in one form or the other. So, according to this article that came out of Investment Watch blog, there's a new study saying that deporting the illegal aliens would save the United States $599 billion compared to allowing the amnesty to move forward and have to financially provide for that population. We're talking $500 billion here. So, the PC is still getting out of control over there. Apparently, next year they're going to do a reboot of the Roseanne TV show. And they're already getting buzz because this will be the first ever network TV show to feature a gender-fluid 9-year-old child character. And this is part of the propaganda to get us so confused about who we are, we don't even know what restroom to use. I mean, Planned Parenthood has put out a new teacher's guide saying that preschoolers should be taught their genitals do not determine their gender. They're just messing with these kids' heads. Now, apparently there was a whole bunch of vegan protesters who were protesting this business until finally the owner decided to post a sign in the window that warns customers animal lives are at risk. The business, by the way, is a butcher shop. Look, if you want to be a vegetarian, that's fine. Just stay out of the butcher shop. But I'm getting really sick and tired of all these people who get a cause, whether it's veganism or human-caused global warming, and they think it gives them a right to go around and tell everybody else how to live their lives. Of course, look at the lesson they're getting from Washington, D.C., which is running around the world saying, you will run your country the way we tell you. By the way, there does seem to be an epidemic of scammers out there. Scam calls, scam software, cybercrime, and it's really out of control because the government's too busy conquering the world to actually take care of the American people. And this is a very sad story. It's over at MSN, and it's talking about this woman who literally designed and built her own home. She's a very short person, so she actually designed a home to match her height. And she lived there 30 years, was planning on living there the rest of her life, and she fell victim to a scam that offered to refinance her mortgage. And it turned out that the scammers just took the new mortgage payments. She stopped the payments on the original mortgage. There was no new mortgage. So the home got repossessed. She lost her home of 30 years falling victim to these scammers. You have got to be very careful. Do not for a second believe that the government in any way, shape, or form is going to be protecting you. You're just not that important to them. So a little side note for you science fiction buffs. A gentleman by the name of Harlan Ellison, very famous science fiction writer. If you're a fan of Star Trek, the original series, he wrote the episode The City on the Edge of Forever, which was one of the best episodes there. He's also famous for actually taking on Paramount Pictures for stealing one of his ideas. Prior to Harlan Ellison, if you were a writer and a studio stole your idea, there wasn't much you could do about it. The cost of a lawsuit was prohibitive. Lawyers would certainly not take it on contingency because the studios were always going to win. And Harlan Ellison had this idea for a robotic police officer with a human partner called Brillo, as in the pad. And Paramount grabbed it, had another writer rewrite it under a different name, and they put it out as Future Cop. And Harlan Ellison, who was a feisty individual, sued. And he mortgaged his house, and he borrowed money from everybody that he could, and eventually he won the lawsuit. And as a result, Hollywood studios, they still like to steal stuff. Producer at Columbia stole something from me at one point, but they're a little more cautious about it right now. Anyway, getting on back to Harlan Ellison, he was also a very short individual, and he had all the doors in his home lowered so that he could walk through standing straight up, and anybody taller than him would have to stoop. When he was working on City on the Edge of Forever, what he wrote wasn't Star Trek. Apparently he hadn't read the Star Trek Writer's Bible. Roddenberry had to do a rewrite on it. And so Roddenberry comes in the next day, and there's Harlan Ellison standing on Roddenberry's desk with a noose around his neck saying, "Tell me you did not touch my script." That's what Harlan Ellison was like. All right, enough of the wander down memory lane here. Getting into the science and health news. Apparently, a lot of information is now being leaked out about Monsanto, and it's exposing this vast operation to kill or suppress any cancer research about glyphosate. Now, we know what Monsanto did in response to that French study that seemed to indicate that there's cancer problems with this product line. We know that the World Health Organization was under serious lobbying from Monsanto not to declare glyphosate a carcinogen, which they finally did. They hedged their bets and said probable carcinogen rather than saying definite carcinogen. And we know that when California put glyphosate on their list of cancer-causing materials, Monsanto fought that tooth and nail. And so apparently a trove of documents was released by LA-based plaintiff firm Baum, Headland, Aristi, and Goldman. And the company is representing people who came down with cancer from exposure to glyphosate. And even more alarming in there, the documents show that Monsanto executives and researchers were communicating with the Environmental Protection Agency to get their cooperation to say this product is perfectly safe. I still remember following 9/11 when the head of the Environmental Protection Agency stood there with all the asbestos dust still swirling in the air and told those first responders they could go to work without special respiration equipment. And they've all been sick ever since. This government doesn't care about you other than what money they can take from you or who they can send you out to kill or your children. That's it. Breed new workers, breed new soldiers, pay your taxes, sit down and shut up. That's the attitude of the government. Now, over in Germany, they've got a problem. Apparently, one of their supermarkets, Aldi, has withdrawn all their eggs from sale in its stores out of fears it's been contaminated by an insecticide. And tests are showing the chemical fipronil. Let me go back and do that again. Fipronil, which can harm people's kidneys, liver, and thyroid glands, was found in these eggs from the Netherlands. And one German official said up to 10 million of the contaminated eggs may have been sold in Germany. And now they're saying that more of these eggs are showing up in other supermarkets. So apparently the fipronil is used to treat the chickens for ticks and other infestations, and it's getting into the eggs that way. Now, a little bit of good news if you like to eat salmon. The U.S. Senate is looking at a bill that will require mandatory labeling of GMO salmon. And a lot of people are very concerned about the GMO salmon. It's modified so it will grow faster and larger more quickly so they can get it to market, sell it, make more money. But as it turns out, most of that increase in size is fat. And as it turns out, the salmon, the GMO salmon, is lacking in certain nutrients that you get from the natural variety. But that's okay. It's making money, and as long as it's making money, it's a good thing. And anything that gets in the way of making money is a bad thing here. Now, we've been talking about the overprescription of medications like opiates. It's really out of control. And it's all about making money. It's all about making money. And there's this article, How Too Much Medicine Can Kill You, from The Guardian, and talking about these patients who are known to be suffering side effects, bad side effects from their prescription medication, but they're scared to stop because their doctors and nurses are saying, oh, if you stop it now, bad things are going to happen. And it's all being driven by the commercial interests of the pharmaceutical industry. Even when they're giving you a medication that is ineffective and harmful, they're going to keep insisting, you got to take it. You just have to take it. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Jerry in Chicago. Aloha, Jerry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Thanks for taking my call. I have quite a few bumper stickers on the back doors of my truck. Well, one of them is government is a noun. One, those in society not bound by the law.
That's a good one. I mean, it wasn't supposed to be that way.
Well, no, it's not supposed to. I thought we were all supposed to abide by the law, but I guess those who write the law don't have to uphold it at all or abide by it.
Yes.
How about this one? Annoy a politician, defend the Constitution.
That's a good one.
Bad criminals go to jail, the best go to Washington.
Yes.
If voting changed anything, they'd make it illegal.
Absolutely. No question about that.
Congress, where arms dealers, pill pushers, bankers, and farmers meet to plan to steal your bovine excrement.
Okay.
The Constitution was written to constrain government. It's now used to constrain the people.
That's certainly true. I mean, a lot of people think the Constitution tells the government what it's allowed to do, But more importantly, it does tell the government what it's not allowed to do. It's not allowed to restrict our speech under any reason. It's not allowed to disarm us. It's not allowed to invade our privacy. Our government is off that constitutional reservation. As far as I'm concerned, that renders it an illegal, illegitimate government.
No, you're 100% right, and I agree with you. I have two Hillary Clinton stickers on the very top, so everybody could read them, clear sight. And one of them with her picture on it says, "We used to hunt communists, now we elect them."
Yes.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. I appreciate all the work you do, and I listen to you every day, buddy.
All right, well,
have a great weekend.
Same to you, and we're going to let you go. Thank you very much for the phone call. Up in Canada, there has been a federally funded study that was basically looking into the content of sausages sold at grocery stores across Canada, and found out that 20% of those sausages contained meat that was different than what was claimed on the label. Now, maybe they just got a bargain deal on this other kind of meat, or maybe one of the delivery trucks hit a deer and they just threw the venison in there. First of all, it is dishonest. And second of all, there are people who have allergies to specific meat products, and they buy a sausage by saying, they read the label and think, oh, this is safe for me to eat. And then they get a reaction. And the study was done by researchers at the University of Guelph and commissioned by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. Got to stay on top of this stuff. Now then, do you remember Martin Shkreli? Well, he's back in the news, and I'm going to tell you exactly why that is when we come back from this next commercial break, which is going to start here in a couple of seconds. So we'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. So we're talking about Martin Shkreli. Now, he first became infamous back when he bought the rights to a medication and raised the cost 5,000% to $750 per pill. And everybody was very angry about that. But apparently he was being driven by some of his other economic activities. And today he has been found guilty of 3 counts of securities fraud. And he was found guilty on 2 counts of securities fraud and 1 count of conspiracy to commit securities fraud. And he'd been charged with 8 counts stemming from what federal prosecutors said was a Ponzi scheme. And Shkreli defrauded investors of 2 hedge funds he managed and siphoned millions from that pharmaceutical company he founded, Retrofin, in order to cover the losses in those funds. That's why he did that price raise on the drug. He figured, we got him. They got to buy the pills. I'm just going to charge them $750 per pill, and I'll be able to put back the money that I took out of the hedge fund. The guy's crook. The guy is just this incredible crook. And I'm glad they found him guilty, and he's facing 20 years in prison. But again, the real villain in all of this is Richard Nixon, who signed that health maintenance organization legislation on behalf of his good buddy over at Kaiser Permanente. And it was at that point medical care stopped being about medical care and became another for-profit racket. And that's exactly what it is. And that's why we have the most expensive medical care on earth and the absolute worst quality medical care of any industrialized nation. Now, it's been exactly 80 years since the U.S. declared war on marijuana, and marijuana is still winning. And, of course, the war on marijuana, then as now, was all about protecting the profits of the breweries, distilleries, wineries, and the tobacco plantations. Because if you're mellowing out on something that you grew in your backyard, well, then you're not going on down to that store to spend your money. Buy that bottle of booze there with that tax sticker on the top of it. When this country first started up, I mean, there were no banned drugs. You could go into a pharmacy at the turn of the 20th century, and you could buy cocaine and opium. But they make it illegal to make the smuggling and trafficking of it more profitable. And that includes the legal opiates. They're more expensive. All right, we're going to take a break for station identification. When we come on back, the lovely Lady Claire will be joining our show. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, hour number 3. And for those of you on BAM User TV, this gorgeous creature sitting next to me is the lovely Lady Claire, who, as usual, joins us on our third hours on Friday with her unique perspective on the world. So take it away, Claire.
All right. This falls under the Ron White one-liner, you can't fix stupid. The EU has imposed more sanctions against Russia and blacklisted its deputy minister.
Oh, boy.
They've decided to broaden sanctions against Moscow today, I'm sure under U.S. pressure.
No doubt about it.
Yeah, as RT notes, more Russian individuals and firms are accused of delivering Siemens gas turbines to the Crimea, and they've been blacklisted. Now, the updated list includes the Russian Deputy Energy Minister, Andrei Sherazov, the head Department of Operational Control and Management in Russia's electric power industry, Yevgeny Grabchak, and the state firm Technoromexport CEO Sergei Topor-Gilga. And this comes from Zero Hedge. This is something that has been expected. But, Mike, I got to tell you, if I were a betting woman, I would be willing to bet that Russia's retaliation will be both swift and severely economically painful.
I don't think Russia's going to need to retaliate. I mean, all they're going to do is turn around to all the other countries and say, we'll do business with you.
Yeah. Well, and then there was the following article that I noted in SputnikNews.com. Moscow is reserving right to respond to EU sanctions extension over Siemens scandal. I think they're going to do something.
Well, they'll probably just sanction back here. But again, the first sanctions were a disaster for Europe.
Yeah.
Caused much more damage there than they did in Russia. The same thing is going to be true now. And you've got the member states of the EU who don't want to go along with this thing.
No, because they're getting hammered.
And they're very unhappy with Brussels over that, which together with the economic hardship caused by the ECB and the refugee crisis, I really don't think the EU is going to make it to the end of the year.
Yeah, another case of them shooting themselves in the foot.
Yes.
Let's pop over to Saudi Arabia, and apparently there has been some very disturbing footage of a Saudi siege against its own citizens. Now, apparently they are in the midst of an extreme and brutal crackdown against its own citizenry in the country's eastern province.
Well, you need to understand that those provinces did not agree with the replacement of the crown prince.
No.
And they're not supporting bin Salman, and he's cracking down on them because the old king is not long for this world.
No,
yeah,
definitely. But there's another aspect of it. The Saudi monarchy and most of the Saudi people are Sunni Shiite.
Yes.
This particular area is Shia. And apparently water and electricity have been cut to the now completely besieged town of Al-Awamiyah. And local activists continue to upload ground-level videos to social media revealing that the entire districts have been leveled. Mike, I mean, houses, schools, homes, gone.
And, of course, not a word from the corporate media.
Oh, heck no. And what really concerns me is the reality that this guy, Prince Salman, is President Trump's new BFF in the Middle East. Hello. And to any of the Trump people, Trump cabinet, etc., who might have people listening, I think our president really needs to think this decision through. This horrific torture, not only against the people of Yemen, but also against Salman's own Shia brother and sister Saudi Arabians, is completely unacceptable and absolutely, completely at odds with true American values. You know.
Oh, boy.
But there's a bright note. You remember this week, there have been sanctions against Russia and Iran.
Yes.
Guess what they just did? They just inked a $2.5 billion deal on Monday to start a much-needed rail wagon operation production. The agreement came between the Industrial Development and Renovation Organization of Iran, or IDRO, if you're into acronyms, and Transmash Holding, which is Russia's largest rail equipment supplier. The two sides will set up a new joint venture which will be 80% owned, though completely funded by the Russian partner. And apparently they're looking at, the Iranians are in the midst of what could be called an infrastructure building bonanza, emerging from decades of sanctions which left much of the country's transportation infrastructure just in terrible, terrible shape.
Well, of course, the U.S. has now thrown sanctions back on there.
Yep.
But again, it's just driving Iran, as this demonstrates, into the Russian sphere of influence.
Yeah, and it's also driving Russia and China even closer together.
Yes.
Yeah. But with this one, I mean, you have to love the smell of irony in the morning.
I wish we could get that company to work on our light rail.
Oh, please don't get me started.
Okay.
The major roads, sort of at the business district where we turn up the road to go various places, it's in a war with my back, guys. I mean...
And you know what's really weird? First part of the year, Claire's Choir did a concert at the Fun Fair. And the transportation people, the people behind the train, had a booth set up there to tell us what a wonderfully swell project this was all going to be. And I asked them point blank, when are you going to be done with the section of the track that's right in front of where we live? And they said, oh, end of February. No problem. And here we are in August. It's still down there.
Yeah.
Apparently they're having to go back into all the little train track segments and replace the tensioning cables, which turned out to be not what they thought they were going to be. But I digress.
Oh, do we have a shout-out, honey? I think we had the message.
We had the message. It's time to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates just now rejoining the network.
The next thing that I would like to talk about is mass Palestinian outpouring defeats Israeli land grab at Al-Aqsa Mosque. And apparently the mass civil disobedience of thousands of Palestinian people, and by the way, some of them were Christian, who demonstrated. They may not even have been religious, but they've kind of pushed the Israeli government back, which is a very rare thing to have happen.
Well, we know, I mean, there's been a lot of talk in the hardliners in Israel about what's going on here. There we are.
Oh, thank you.
All right. There's been a lot of talk by the hardliners about just, taking over the Temple Mount. We know that the group that manages the Temple Mount are saying that Israel has stolen documents regarding the ownership of the land and could, in theory, through fraud, come in and say, well, funny thing, we were going through the old file cabinets and it turns out we own this land, so you're all going to have to leave now.
Yeah. And apparently the spirit of unity amongst Jerusalemites has been extraordinary. People from all walks of life came up, and very peacefully. And again, they weren't doing this with bombs and bullets, guys.
No, that was all on the side of the IDF.
Yeah. They were doing it with presence and mass presence and trying to make sure that things did stay as peaceful as possible. And to all those who kind of got the Israeli government to back away from the closure of Al-Aqsa, my hat's off to you, all of you.
Well,
all of you.
I don't think this is over, especially with one of Netanyahu's close confidants now flipping. He's made a deal with prosecutors.
Yeah.
He's going to stay out of jail.
Yeah.
But he's going to testify against Netanyahu. So Netanyahu's going to need a new distraction somewhere.
Yeah.
It could be Al-Aqsa. Could be invading Lebanon, but that's the way these politicians think. If they're in trouble, create a mess someplace else.
Create a distraction. That's what the Al-Aqsa Mosque was all about, was creating a distraction. Because Netanyahu had to know that, that these charges were going to be brought up against him.
He's been dealing with these things for months and months now, and as it heats up, and again, he's playing to that portion of Israel's leadership. And all of the rabbis who are saying, it's ours, it's ours, it's ours, get the infidels off and so forth.
Yeah. I'd like to address something that I know you talked about earlier, but I have it from a slightly different perspective. Now, this doesn't come sourced, guys, which means it doesn't come from the mountain. But South Korean military officials reportedly said that the USS Ronald Reagan and USS Carl Vinson were being considered for deployment to the North Korean peninsula. Pentagon didn't reply to a request from Sputnik News confirming or denying that these that these reports are true. And Mike, let me ask a question because I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say that these two carrier groups have to come from just the opposite side of the world, where they may be stationed now. How long would it take, under those kind of circumstances, for them to get into position for any kind of confrontation?
Well, we know they're not on the other side of the world. We know that I think the Carl Vinson group is down in Indonesia right now, and I don't know where the Ronald Reagan is.
Okay.
How fast they can move is usually determined by the slowest ship in the group, because these carriers do not sail by themselves.
Right.
And in fact, I would say probably the slowest ships are going to be the submarines that are operating outside the picket line.
Gotcha.
So it's hard to say, but I would speculate probably if they got the order to go today, that they would they could be there in a week.
Okay.
And remember, we keep hearing this date of September 1st, as the go point for whatever it is they're going to do in North Korea.
Okay. I would like to hope that China's President Xi Jinping and President Trump are having some back-channel discussions on this, but the problem with that is how publicly Trump has demonized China on his Twitter account.
Well, you've got that. You've got the pressure in the South China Sea. Now you've got Donald Trump threatening a trade war. He's not going to get any cooperation at all from China.
Not only is he not going to get any cooperation, but the scenario that I fear the worst, Mike, is for China to make the decision to come to North Korea's aid militarily, should hostilities break out between the U.S. and North Korea.
Well,
what do you think?
I would hope that it would be limited to providing material support.
Yeah.
I don't think Xi Jinping wants to go to direct war with the United States over North Korea. I think he understands that the United States is using North Korea as a backdoor to war with China to destroy the yuan before it destroys the U.S. dollar. And I think Xi Jinping is ready to write off North Korea in order to avoid that confrontation, which is only a delaying tactic because sooner or later the U.S. is going to get around to China anyway, the way things are going. Let's grab a quick phone call here. Turner in Pittsburgh. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. Been listening to another website called, I guess, Benjamin Fulford Updates, and a lot of the stuff he has to say just goes right over my head with all these different groups and stuff like that. But he did say one thing that I want your opinion on, if I may ask. He said that there may be a plot out on the current administration because the current president won't do what they say he needs to do. He needs to declare America bankrupt, and by doing so, that supposedly set into forces that may actually improve the world. Is it possible for the current president to declare the America bankrupt? And if so, is it actually a step in the right direction? Can you expound on that?
Well, the instant anybody officially declares the U.S. government to be bankrupt, there are going to be economic consequences which are going to be felt more by the people than by the government itself. And it would mark the beginning of some serious economic hardship for the American people. But again, if you really think about how recklessly they've been printing up new money to cover all their debts, if they didn't have that printing press at the Federal Reserve, the U.S. government would have been bankrupt a long, long time ago. And the big issue is going to be when they declare bankruptcy, you're going to see everybody dumping their treasuries. There are going to be repercussions all over the world. And unfortunately, at this point, I don't think there's any way to hold off a major crash. And we're hearing all of these top economic experts saying it's going to happen before the end of the year, maybe as soon as October.
Yeah, that's what it also said in the Fulford report, that there are foreign agents trying to get the current administration to admit that we are bankrupt so that we can proceed forward, whatever that means. Is this similar to your talking about a Soviet-style collapse? Because I hear you saying that, but I never really quite understand what you mean. So I'll hang up now to see what your answer is, okay?
Okay, well, basically what I'm talking about, if you look at the end of the Soviet Union, it was a twofold problem, actually threefold. There was a lot of infighting between the reformers and the hardliners that was in full public view. There was a loss of all confidence and trust by the Soviet people who had set up this ad hoc peer-to-peer communication system on fax machines called the samizdat. And they came to understand they couldn't trust anything their government was saying. Then there was the economic problem. The Soviet Union overspent itself on their military, partly in response to the claims being made about the Strategic Defense Initiative, most of which never really worked out. And yeah, all three working together brought the Soviet Union down. The Russian people had about 3-4 months of very serious hard times they had to get through. And then, of course, they formed the new Russian Federation, and things are a lot better today than they were under the Soviet Union. And I'm seeing so many parallels between what happened in the Soviet Union and what's going on in this country now, along with obvious parallels between what's going on in this country right now and what was happening in Rome before it started to come apart. So, in point of fact, that's what I mean when I say a Soviet Union-style collapse. And that, I think, would be the best possible outcome, because I don't want to see a civil war in the streets of America. No. I don't want to see a revolution. And one thing that was notable about the collapse of the Soviet Union, it was relatively bloodless. Now, some people got hurt. There was that final confrontation, an attempt at, by the hardliners to take control back. But, that was a very, very small, very brief skirmish at best. And, of course, it would certainly end the United States' aggressions against all these other countries, and we might be able to dodge a nuclear war if that happens. All right, so Claire,
all right, thanks, Mike.
All right, you got it. What is your next story?
Apparently, Pence's Balkan comments exposed Washington's Cold War ideology, according to Russians. Accusations made by Vice President Mike Pence that Russia is working to divide the Balkans from the West are destabilizing Southern Europe and exposing Washington's Cold War mentality, the Russian foreign minister said yesterday. Pence made the comments on Wednesday in Montenegro on the final leg of a tour designed to reassure Eastern Europe of Washington's commitment to its security, despite doubts sowed by U.S. President Donald Trump's lukewarm support for NATO. And the ministry made this observation, very interesting. It is regrettable to note that Washington is sliding ever deeper into the primitive ideology of the Cold War era, which is completely detached from reality, the minister said. It had called on the United States to stop defaming Russia and its foreign policy, which it said was based on respect for all allies and readiness to work with international partners, the ministry said in a statement. Now, Mike, the Russian Foreign Ministry has got to know where all this Russia demonization is leading. There are those in the bowels of power in D.C. who are just mad dog crazy enough to envision a shooting war with Russia, China, Iran, or North Korea, take your pick, as a way to diffuse the coming economic crash and to prevent the world from evolving into a more multipolar economic environment, which, ultimately, with the unhinged, surveilled state of America in decline, is nearly inevitable. Unfortunately, those in the bowels of power who desire this outcome have managed to deliberately stay pig ignorant of the real state of affairs when it comes to our military. Now, that said, I support and I respect our military completely. But the inevitable hard truth is this. At this very moment in its existence, the U.S. military does not have the weaponry, the troop strength, the money, or the manufacturing to ensure a positive outcome against Russia and or China, or Russia and Iran, or China and North Korea. Again, take your pick.
And even the Pentagon is out there saying, in a force-on-force war, the Russian army will annihilate the American army. Because, and as I said earlier in the show, even if they bring back the draft, look at the young draft age population. They're all a bunch of liberal whiners who cry at every little offense. 38% of them are obese from all the chemicals in our food. Yep. That is, you're not going to get an effective fighting force out of that. And when you blend it together with the very expensive and poorly performing weapons coming out of our current military-industrial complex, it's a recipe for a disaster. And on the day when the U.S. government realizes they cannot win a conventional war against Russia or China, they'll resort to the nuclear weapons. We have to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're looking at the feed on Fox News. Apparently, people in Illinois are just now getting their notices about their premium increases for Obamacare next year. And apparently it's pretty bad. It's really, really bad. And I think the GOP Congress, and specifically John McCain, may have handed the Democrats the perfect device for the Democrats to take Congress next year. Mm-hmm. And it's rather amazing to see that in their eagerness to block Donald Trump at every turn, that they're willing to sacrifice their majority in Congress.
And they're hurting people.
They're hurting
people.
And, of course, they're hurting people.
It's terrible.
It really is. All right, what's your next story?
Apparently, Air France has expanded North Korea no-fly zone after missile miss.
Yes, that was a little uncomfortable. Apparently, that rocket did come down rather, well, not really close. Basically, one of their jets flew near the location where the missile came down 10 minutes after it came down.
Yeah, missed it by about 60 miles. And this, the Air France KLM flies direct from Tokyo to Osaka, and the expansion of the no-fly zone could make the flights 10 to 30 minutes longer. And which I know is going to be a pain for business passengers with schedules to keep. But, Mike, under the current circumstances, I completely understand Air France KLM's decision to do this.
Well, see, normally when somebody is going to do a missile test, they'll issue a notice to mariners and to aviation.
A NOTAR, right?
No, that's something else. NOTAM.
NOTAM, I'm sorry.
Yeah, a NOTAM.
Yeah, okay.
And, for example, when they were flinging missiles all over the ocean just off Long Island, they had issued a NOTAM. And that was one of the pieces of evidence which led people to understand that TWA 800 was an accidental shoot down during a U.S. weapons test and had nothing to do with terrorists. So North Korea should have issued the same thing, or maybe they have such problems with their guidance that they're not really sure where that thing was going to come on down.
Yeah.
But somebody somewhere wasn't playing by the rules.
Yeah. Absolutely. The next article comes to us from antiwar.com. Russian sanctions and the coming crackdown on Americans. And this particular writer wrote an article and did an interview explaining that in his reading of the new Russian sanctions bill just signed by President Trump, there is a measure opening the door to a U.S. government crackdown on some of the non-mainstream media. In particular, there is a Section 221 of the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act, which would punish persons who are engaging in transactions with the intelligence or defense sectors of the government of the Russian Federation. Now, if this sounds far-fetched, if the Russian government and RT are opposed to sanctions and you operate a website that also takes a line in opposition to these Russian sanctions, are you not doing the work of Russian intelligence?
Well,
I mean,
according to the Washington Post, that's
Yeah.
exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
still have our little coffee cup here. Proud
Yes.
member of Washington Post's arm of Russian intelligence. Now, notice, though, that the language says engaging in transactions with the intelligence or defense sectors of the government of the Russian Federation. That would seem to me that merely saying that you're opposed to war is not going to get you in trouble. But if you are, in fact, communicating with Russia's intelligence agencies or the Defense Department, then you will be in trouble. And obviously, we're not doing either one.
No.
And I couldn't even get a reply from Goskino when I wanted to go make movies. But
okay.
So, but yeah.
And when the Washington Postule put this article out, sorry, couldn't resist.
Okay.
They were naming people like Zero Hedge. Again, Tyler Durden is someone for whom I have a tremendous amount of respect. His intellectual capabilities and his abilities to lay things out intelligently are wonderful. And but to call this guy and his blog an agency of the Russian government, I mean, that's desperation on the cusp of madness, Mike.
It is. It's a return to McCarthyism.
Yeah.
Oh, we got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And before we hand the microphone back over to the lovely Lady Claire here, apparently Representative Delaney is now officially in the 2020 election campaign for president. He wants to go for that Democratic nomination. And if Hillary is really serious that she's going to run as well, then Mr. Delaney, I would stay out of small aircraft.
And don't get depressed.
And don't get really, really depressed.
Yeah.
And he's out there already saying, if I'm elected president, I will fix Obamacare. So they're already sending the message, you're stuck with Obamacare for the next 3 years because they're not going to allow the Republicans to do anything to Obamacare. It's making too much money for the health insurance industries. And things that make money are good. And things that get in the way of making money are bad.
Yeah.
All right, your next story.
Well, this is nothing short of miraculous, and I almost couldn't believe it when I read it. Again, this comes to us from antiwar.com. U.S. likely to expand UN talks on North Korean sanctions. And diplomats familiar with the situation say that the U.S. is likely to expand its talks on trying to get the UN Security Council to impose a new round of sanctions against North Korea for its recent ICBM test, likely to show the resolution to more on the Security Council members. And it goes on to say it is noteworthy that this behind-the-scenes resolution exists at all, as just days ago, Ambassador Nikki Haley angrily dismissed the seeking of any action at the UN Security Council at all, saying the time for talk is over.
Oh, my goodness. Somebody blinked.
Yeah, but apparently the U.S. and China have been talking about this resolution all along, with the U.S. keeping Britain and France up to date with the situation, and the diplomats say they assume China has shown the resolution to Russia. And what is thoroughly amazing about all this is that Russia and China are still talking to the U.S. diplomatically after how they were treated by this country.
Especially the Russian diplomats.
Man.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And
hang on, we're going to take a phone call here from Apostle over in New Jersey. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Hope you and Claire are doing well.
We're doing fine. Thank you very much.
Okay, the two of you are a pleasure to see, especially on Fridays. Mike, you're a pleasure to see all the week. So.
Well, thank you, but I like looking at her.
So what's on your mind, Apostle?
My problem is what you just said about Obamacare, saying that the Democrats are going to win the Congress.
I said the Democrats could win the Congress.
It was possible.
It was possible.
Yeah.
I mean, right now, approval of Congress on the whole is 10%. But unfortunately, people are looking at the GOP just obstructing any effort to repeal and replace Obamacare. Everybody was just furious with John McCain for voting against the repeal when only a year ago he was just excoriating the Democrats for what a disaster Obamacare is. I think there were 5 GOP votes against that repeal, and that's what made the difference. And they should have voted it on through because it was one of not just Donald Trump's campaign promises, it was part of the platform of the GOP as a whole. And so I think you're going to have a lot of very angry voters looking at those double-digit rate increases that start in January, and they're going to remember it come November.
Yeah, you're correct on that. But you know what? They're also going to know that the GOP tried to repeal it. You know what? You had 3 holdouts on it. You know, you had Collins, you had McCain, and I don't even know who the third was. But the thing is, people are seeing that, you know, it was 3 holdouts. I think they're going to be going more for Republican just to say, here, let's get rid of this. I think you're going to get a bigger GOP Congress in the next election cycle than we have now. I don't think the Democrats won anything in regards to this except a stick it up yours to Donald Trump.
That's what both parties were in Congress apparently were up to, but American voters tend to think simplistically in terms of assigning blame, and they're going to say the Democrats did this, the Republicans did that. And I think most of these people who are getting these notifications of massive increases on Obamacare are going to be looking at the recent congressional vote and saying, yeah, the GOP failed. In fact, I'm already seeing these stories all over the media right now about how the Congress has sort of gone into the August recess with having accomplished nothing of any note in the last 8 months other than to push us closer and closer to war. And now, of course, we have this stunt that the Senate is doing where they're going to call pro forma sessions all during the recess so that Trump can't make a recess appointment.
Right, but of course they're seeing that this is a Democratic blockade in regards to anything Trump wants to do. I mean,
well, it's seen as bipartisan. You've got bipartisan support of Robert Mueller. It's both parties. The deep state are very obviously at war with Donald Trump. And again, getting on back to the Obamacare repeal, that was a major part of Trump's promise, and his own party, the GOP, betrayed him on that, and I think the voters are going to remember that last year. And the other issue, of course, where they're going to get very upset is over the way that Republicans are going along with all of this nonsense about the Trump-Russia collusion and are just as eager as the Democrats to try and make the Hillary scandal go away. There are a few exceptions, of course, in there. But, you know, when Trump was down there in West Virginia with the governor who just went from the Democratic to the Republican Party, switched over, you know, and Trump was out there telling the crowd, why isn't the Congress investigating Hillary Clinton? And, of course, the crowd just went wild, shouting, lock her up, lock her up. Yeah. And so, again, I think Trump would have been smarter to actually do a veto fight with Congress over the Russian sanctions, and he would have lost, but it would have cemented in the eyes of the public that the problem is not Donald Trump, the problem is Congress.
Yes.
And, you know, Donald Trump, unfortunately, he's being blockaded on everything he's trying to do. He's being controlled and used. And, again, they're trying to make him look like he's a total failure, and they're going to take that into the 2018 elections and the 2020 elections.
You know what? I don't think Trump knew how deep that swamp was.
I said that even when he was still running for the nomination. I said my problem with Donald Trump is he is as dangerously naive about the reality of D.C. politics as Jimmy Carter was. And, you know, boy, I hate being right all the time. But, Trump really is out of his depth. And he's got to regain the initiative. He's still got people working in his White House who are ready to hold the door as he gets kicked out.
Yeah, you know what? And everything he does, whatever, every person in Congress or the Senate, they have some sort of scam going on that they're hoping doesn't get materialized. They don't want it coming to the surface.
Well, that's one of the reasons why they're so opposed to Donald Trump. It goes to the heart of that narcocracy. Because I can't imagine Donald Trump, if he finds out that the biggest drug smuggler in the country is going to sit still for that. Obama went along with the deal so that he could be president. That's why he was allowed in when he pulled ahead of Hillary Clinton. And part of that was another miscalculation on Hillary's part. She was so focused on Ron Paul's campaign that she wasn't paying attention as Obama started to close in on her.
You know what? I can't say she's naive. She's arrogant.
Oh, she's a pure sociopath.
Yep.
Absolutely. And she's dangerous. And while I am disappointed with Donald Trump, I do not regret my decision to support him, because if Hillary was in that White House, we would be at shooting war with Russia and China right now.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% there, Mike.
Okay, well,
Mike, thank you for taking my call.
You're welcome. We're going to let you go. Thank you very much for the phone call, and back to you, Claire.
Okay, well, and this really annoys and upsets me. The Senate panel has approved a bill to suspend aid to Palestinians. The Senate Foreign Relations Commission has voted today 17-4 to pass a bill that would suspend all U.S. financial aid to the Palestinian Authority until they agree to end social programs, which congressmen describe as, quote-unquote, financial incentive for terrorism. The Palestinian General Delegation to the U.S. says the bill is misinformed and that the social programs in question are not intended to reward terror, but rather to provide bare minimum support to Palestinian families who lose their breadwinners to the occupation. and noted that the vast majority of these in question were unduly arrested or killed by Israel. And, of course, that's not going to really play well in Congress, as Israel has long presented these programs essentially as payment for terror attacks. And, of course, this doesn't account for the large number of Palestinians in Israeli prisons held without charges indefinitely, or just on broad suspicion of incitement, whatever that means. Well, Mike, I guess that whatever Israel and AIPAC want from the U.S. Congress, Israel and AIPAC get.
Yeah, isn't it amazing? Our Congress cannot agree on health care for the American people, but whatever Israel wants, it's a near unanimous vote. And we are living under foreign occupation. The government in Washington, D.C. is a puppet ruler for a foreign power, and we should not be comfortable with it, no more than the Iraqis are, the Afghani, the Yemenites, the Libyans. They're all fighting back.
Yeah.
Okay.
We are seeing a major Russian military exercise in Belarus next month, and it is the famed Russian tank corps that Putin is sending to NATO's border. Now, it is estimated that there will be as many as 100,000 Russian troops arriving in Belarus in September for what's called the Zapad military exercise, and with them will be a storied tank corps. The 1st Guards Tank Army, an historic corps-sized formation that President Vladimir Putin reassembled in 2015, is being sent to take part in the Zapad military exercise, which means West in Russian. A number of Western generals and politicians have expressed concerns about the Zapad military exercise in the next few months. And people like Army General Ben Hodges has said people are worried that this is a Trojan horse.
Of course, Russia's looking at all those NATO exercises on the other side of the border and saying exactly the same thing.
And there was one very disturbing statement made by Estonia's defense minister, Margus Tashka, and it made this to Reuters in April. The minister's statement was, for Russian troops going to Belarus, it is a one-way ticket. Now, Mike, forgive me, but why in the name of heaven would this guy make this observation except if he knows that there is going to be some horrific false flag coming to be blamed on Russia, North Korea, or Iran, or perhaps all three allegedly colluding to make it happen? And this is what is going to be used to get a world war going by the U.S.
It is a very strange statement.
Yeah.
Or he may simply be saying that these troops going into Belarus are simply going to stay there, much the way that the NATO troops following their supposed exercises are still in place in their in position.
In the
they're
Baltics
not,
and Eastern
they're not
Europe.
going home either.
Yeah. Now, the drills are scheduled to run between September 14th and 20th, and will also involve naval and air units operating in and around the Baltic and North Sea. Let's just hope and pray, folks, that nothing goes sideways here. But to the people who read this blog and listen to the What Really Happened radio show, please, I'm saying this very calmly, I don't want to be Mrs. Chicken Little of Oahu. Have your preps for food, water, medication, and self-defense equipment you feel comfortable with, please sorted by the 13th of next month.
Yeah, absolutely.
My sense is that something wicked this way comes, and we all need to be prepared for it and figure out who we can connect with in terms of our neighborhood, where people can work together and plan together and help each other out. That's going to be critical. And this also dovetails into another article here. U.S. plans global drills to counter Russian and other complex threats, top U.S. military officials. The U.S. military is shifting toward a more global exercise program in preparation to deter what they call a more assertive Russia, whatever the darned heck that means, as well as countering other complex threats. A senior officer commanding the U.S. forces in Europe has said, what we're eventually going toward is a globally integrated exercise program so that we are all working off the same sheet of music, I hate that phrase, in one combined global exercise, Air Force General Brigadier John Healy said, who directs the drills of U.S. forces in Europe, told Reuters. Healy said troops need to be prepared for increasingly complex threats all across all domains of war, land, sea, air, space, and cybersphere. The general went on to say that the training must include rehearsing possible conflicts and taking into account the global nature of the military threats facing the U.S. Well, Mike...
Sounds like they're practicing to just conquer the whole world all at once.
Yeah,
get away from this piecemeal, one-at-a-time situation.
And the thing that just bothers me is that Russia has done absolutely nothing I can see to justify this demonization against it. And the world is watching how the unhinged, surveilled states of America continues to invade country after country, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and Somalia, in order to accomplish regime change, and is very concerned about what country might be next in the USSA's crosshairs. Right now, were I a betting woman, I would bet that the next two countries on the USSA's high-interest targets list for regime change, do-over, are Iran and North Korea, although not necessarily in that order.
Well, it's the special high-interest targets list.
Yeah.
And, well, again, we're hearing September 1st for the attack on North Korea. And
October
for Iran.
Yeah.
You know, they're rushing. They're literally in a race against the economic collapse.
Yeah.
Because if the economy collapses and they don't have a big war to blame it on, the American people are going to point the finger of blame at Wall Street money junkies and their enablers in the Congress.
Yes, absolutely. And here was another very disturbing article from Blacklisted News. A letter from H.R. McMaster said that Susan Rice would keep her top security clearance, almost a month after it was disclosed that President Obama's National Security Advisor Susan Rice was unmasking members of President Trump's team and other Americans. Trump's own National Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster, sent an official letter giving her unfettered and continuing access to classified information and waiving her need-to-know requirement on anything she viewed or received during her tenure, Circa has confirmed. The undated and unclassified letter from McMaster's was sent in the mail to Rice's home during the last week of April of this year. Trump was not aware of the letter or McMaster's decision, according to two senior West Wing officials and an intelligence officer who spoke to Circa, which is another very steady-as-she-goes blog. And I would like a word with Mr. McMaster. Why and how the darned heck did you let this happen?
Well, it's going to be a long-distance call because he's on his way to Afghanistan now.
Yeah.
We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program on this Pauhana Friday. And what do you have for us, Claire?
Well, BAE, Britain's largest arms maker, just posted record profits. It has made $733 million in 6 months, and expects further growth in results posted weeks after surviving a high court challenge to its multi-billion-dollar arms sales with Saudi Arabia. BAE lauded the sale of Typhoon jets to Oman and noted that its court victory over the anti-arms trade campaigners in the results, saying net profits soared 36% to £555 million, $733 million in U.S., in the 6 months to the end of June, compared with only £408 million a year earlier. It said its profits were boosted by UK government defence spending and a weak pound following Britain's decision to leave the European Union. Sales forged almost 10% higher to stand at $9.565 billion in total. Charles Woodburn, BAE's CEO, said BAE Systems' performance in the first half was consistent with our expectation and guidance for the year. We have a sound platform for medium-term growth underpinned by a clear and consistent strategy.
Start a war, make money.
Yeah, Mr. Woodburn, a word please. Your sound strategy is leaving hundreds of thousands dead and maimed for life in Yemen, courtesy of Saudi bombing runs against it. So glad you feel so great and completely conscience-free about this.
Now, in this country, the gun grabbers are trying to mount lawsuits against gun manufacturers saying they bear the guilt for the murders committed with their product.
Yep.
Well, shouldn't the same thing apply to the arms manufacturers?
I agree.
Shouldn't shouldn't the arms manufacturers bear part of the responsibility for the estimated 30 million people murdered by the United States government since the end of World War II? I think they should.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's just so nasty out there.
Okay, we did this one.
Okay,
so,
all righty.
We've got about 2 minutes left here.
All right. Oh, very interesting. YouTube's new ADL Thought Police punish conservatives while giving far-left extremists a pass. YouTube recently teamed up with the ultra-liberal Anti-Defamation League, ADL, for their Trusted Flaggers program to determine what people should and should not be allowed to watch as we continue the march towards a nanny state supported by the technocratic left. Originally organized to combat anti-Semitism, the ADL, with its Soros-linked national director who last worked in the Obama administration, now spouts hyperbolic propaganda against conservatives, while failing to apply the same nebulous standards to the left. For example, their recent push to lump all Trump supporters in with white supremacists, while insulating progressives from far-left organizations such as the anti-Semitic black nationalist hate group, the New Black Panthers, and the increasingly violent Antifa. Well, Mike, this is a thoroughly predictable marriage between the ADL and YouTube. One which will censor and eliminate any content which even has the slightest bit of logical criticism against Israel.
Yeah, unfortunately it is. All right, there's the music. It's time for us to get on out of here. We hope you have a really good weekend. Please stay tuned for John Stedmiller's program. And remember, take what you learn here, share it with everybody that you know. I have never seen the world in such danger of destruction globally in my entire lifetime, which is now getting very, very long. We'll be back on Monday. Aloha, America.